If you're listening to this on Nightmare Crypt, I need you to understand something before you go any further. This isn't entertainment to me. This is a warning. I don't know how much time I have left, or how long I can keep pretending this didn't change me. If you're new here, subscribe now, not because it helps a channel, but because people forget these stories too easily, and forgetting is how this spreads. My name doesn't matter. What matters is the town I went to, and what followed me back. I'm writing this because sleep isn't working anymore. I don't mean insomnia. I mean every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, not dreaming, reliving. The smell comes first. Damp earth, rotting leaves, livestock waste baked into old wood. A low, uneven pressure in my ears, like standing too close to industrial machinery. But there's no machine. Something irreversible happened in Dunwich. I didn't believe in cursed towns, or generational madness, or places that rot people from the inside. I believed in zoning issues, poverty cycles, and bad infrastructure. That's why I went there. That's why I stayed longer than I should have. And that's why I can't stay anywhere quiet now. If you're hearing this and you've ever considered going off-grid, buying cheap land in the middle of nowhere, or helping forgotten communities, don't. Some places aren't forgotten. They're avoided. I'm not telling you what I saw yet. I'm not even sure I can. Every time I try to describe it directly, my hands shake and my mind slides away from the details, like something doesn't want to be named. All I can say is this: Dunwich is real, and it notices when you start paying attention. I went to Dunwich for work. That's the part that still makes this hard to explain, because it wasn't some reckless adventure. I was contracted by a regional utility company to inspect abandoned infrastructure, old power lines, unused water systems, collapsed substations, boring stuff. Rural New England is full of forgotten towns like that. Dunwich sat at the end of a cracked 2-lane road, surrounded by hills that felt too close together. The GPS signal dropped about 5 miles out, and my phone clock reset twice before I reached the town sign. The sign itself was half-rotted plywood, hand-painted, the letters uneven like they'd been traced over again and again. Population 312, at least, that's what it said. The town smelled wrong, not rotten, stagnant, like water left sitting too long in plastic. Houses were spread far apart, most of them old farm structures with additions slapped on over decades. No sidewalks, no streetlights, just dirt shoulders and utility poles leaning at odd angles. People watched me, not openly, just enough to notice. At the diner, 1 room, 6 tables, no menu board, I ordered coffee and eggs. The woman behind the counter didn't ask my name. She didn't ask where I was from. She just stared at me for a beat too long, then poured the coffee without a word. The locals didn't whisper. They went silent. I told myself it was small-town suspicion, outsider paranoia, but there were little things I couldn't quite explain away. The clocks were off. Every single one. The diner wall clock was 10 minutes slow. The microwave clock behind the counter was 12 minutes fast. My watch drifted by almost 5 minutes in the hour I sat there. Outside, I noticed animals tied up far from the houses. Goats, chickens, even dogs. No fences, just long chains staked deep into the ground, as if distance mattered more than escape. That night at the motel, 2 stories, 8 rooms, and no working Wi-Fi, I lay awake listening to the hills. There were no crickets, no wind, just that pressure in my ears. My first inspection site was an old pumping station near a dried creek bed. The structure was concrete and steel, half sunk into the earth like it had tried to bury itself. Vines had grown through the vents. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, the air was warmer than it should have been. Not hot, just alive. Like breathing near a crowd. I heard something move. Not footsteps, more like weight shifting. Slow, deliberate. I called out, thinking maybe another contractor had beaten me there. My voice sounded wrong inside the building, flattened, like the walls absorbed parts of it. No answer. I finished the inspection faster than usual. I didn't document the deep grooves in the concrete floor that looked like something heavy had been dragged back and forth. I didn't photograph the stains that didn't match oil or rust. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Something walked outside my motel room. I know that sounds mundane, but the rhythm was wrong. Too slow, too careful. Whoever it was stopped directly outside my door and stood there long enough for my heart to start pounding in my throat. No handle turn, just waiting. The next morning my boots were gone. I found them later, placed neatly at the edge of the woods behind the motel, toes pointing inward toward the trees. That's when I started keeping notes. Patterns began to emerge. Every night the pressure in my ears intensified around the same time, just after midnight. The locals avoided certain roads after dark. Conversations ended abruptly if I mentioned the hills. I stopped asking questions. I started losing time. The first real panic hit when I realized my notes were changing. I woke up to find new sentences written in my notebook. Same handwriting, same pen, but I had no memory of writing them. Don't stand too close to the wells. Listen for the breathing under the ground. Distance matters. That last one was underlined 3 times. I tried leaving Dunwich. Packed my gear, loaded the truck. No sound, no click, just dead. That's when I heard it clearly for the first time. Breathing. Not near me, beneath me. The ground vibrated faintly, like something massive, shifting its weight underground. I dropped to my knees without meaning to. The fear wasn't emotional, it was physical. A command buried deep in my body, telling me to stay still. I wasn't in control anymore. That night, I followed the sound into the hills. I don't remember deciding to go. I only remember realizing I was already there. The structure I found wasn't a building. It was a pit, circular, reinforced with old stone and newer concrete, like generations had tried to contain the same mistake. The breathing came from inside. I leaned over the edge. Something moved up toward the light. I screamed. I know I did because my throat burned afterward. Whatever rose inside that pit wasn't fully visible, but the shape of it pressed against the darkness wrong. Too many angles, too much mass. The ground cracked. I ran. Behind me something followed. Not fast, but inevitable. I don't remember how I escaped Dunwich. I just know I woke up on a highway shoulder miles away. My truck running, my notebook open beside me. One final sentence written in shaking ink. You came too close. I'm telling you this because I can feel it again. That pressure, that awareness. It doesn't care where I am. Distance only delays it. If you ever hear about Dunwich, if someone offers you cheap land, quiet hills, isolation, don't go. Some places don't need you to believe in them. They already believe in you. I'm going to keep going, but I need you to understand something first. Writing this makes it worse. Every time I put details down, the pressure comes back faster. My teeth hurt. Sometimes I feel like the room I'm in has gotten smaller without actually changing shape. But if I stop now, I don't think I'll ever finish, and unfinished things seem to bother it the most. So I'm continuing, slowly, carefully. After I woke up on the highway shoulder, I convinced myself, briefly, that I'd had some kind of breakdown. Exposure, stress, maybe carbon monoxide from the truck. Those explanations lasted exactly as long as it took me to notice the dirt under my fingernails. It wasn't roadside dirt. It was dark, almost black, packed with bits of dead grass and something fibrous that smelled like old roots. The same soil I'd seen around the pit. My notebook was open to the last page. I hadn't written anything new, but the ink on the previous line was smeared, like my hand had been shaking when I closed it. My phone had no signal, and claimed it was 3 days earlier than it should have been. I drove. I didn't stop for food. I didn't stop for gas until the needle hit empty. When I finally pulled into a rest station, the fluorescent lights felt too bright, too clean. I sat in the bathroom stall for almost an hour just breathing, waiting for my heart rate to slow down. That's when I heard it again. Not the breathing, not yet. This was softer, a faint vibration like distant machinery. It traveled through the tile floor, up my legs, and settled somewhere behind my eyes. I told myself it was trucks on the highway, but when I pressed my ear to the wall, the sound didn't change. That night in a cheap motel 2 states away, I dreamed of the hills. They weren't shaped the same as Dunwich anymore. They were closer together, crowding in, their slopes steeper, their surfaces bare of trees. I stood between them, looking down into a widening crack in the earth. Something below shifted, and the sound it made wasn't breathing anymore. It was adjusting. I woke up with blood on my pillow from my nose, and a voicemail on my phone I didn't remember recording. It was 38 seconds long, mostly silence. At the very end, I heard myself whisper, "It's still under me." I didn't go home. Home didn't feel like a place anymore. Just another enclosed space with a floor I couldn't trust. I rented a short-term apartment in a city where the ground was layered with concrete and steel. Somewhere old, dense, heavy. I figured if anything could muffle what I'd heard, it would be that. For a while, it worked. The pressure in my ears faded. My sleep improved. I started eating again. I almost convinced myself I'd left Dunwich behind. Then the construction started. A few blocks away, they began excavation for a new transit expansion. I watched from my window as they tore up asphalt and sank drills into the earth. Every night as the work progressed, the vibration returned. Familiar, intimate, too close. I stopped sleeping again. I started keeping the TV on, then the radio, then white noise layered on top of both. Silence felt dangerous now. Silence felt like an invitation. One night, while lying awake, I felt it clearly for the first time since leaving Dunwich. A shift. Not above me, not beside me, below. I sat up so fast I got dizzy. The room looked normal. The walls were steady, the floor didn't crack. But my body knew something my eyes didn't. The same instinct that had dropped me to my knees at the pit told me, without words, that whatever was down there was aware of where I was. Not me specifically, just above. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, because the alternative was screaming. I told myself this was anxiety, trauma response, my brain misfiring after stress. Then my notebook fell off the nightstand. I hadn't touched it in days. When I picked it up, there was a new entry, written neatly, calmly. Cities make it harder to hear, not harder to reach. I stopped writing after that. I tried to destroy the notebook, ripped out pages, burned them in the sink. The paper curled and blackened, but the writing didn't disappear right away. It faded slowly, like ink soaking backward into the fibers. The next morning, the notebook was back on my desk, whole. I didn't touch it again. That's when the physical symptoms started to escalate. Nosebleeds became daily. My ears rang constantly. Sometimes I'd lose balance for no reason, like the floor had tilted a fraction of an inch. I'd catch myself standing perfectly still for long stretches of time, not thinking about anything, just listening. The breathing never fully returned, but something else did. Pressure patterns. At night, lying in bed, I'd feel slow pulses beneath me, not rhythmic like a heartbeat, more like testing, as if something was pressing upward in different places, mapping where weight was concentrated. I tried sleeping on the couch, then on the floor, then nowhere at all. The worst moment, the one that still makes my hands shake, came during a moment of total quiet. It was late. The city was still. No sirens, no traffic. I'd finally turned everything off, exhausted beyond fear. That's when I felt the certainty settle in. It wasn't moving toward me. It was waiting for me to stop moving. I don't remember standing up. One second I was sitting on the bed, the next I was barefoot on the apartment floor, palms flat against the concrete, cheek pressed down like I was listening for a train. I wasn't scared anymore. That's the part that terrifies me now. I felt calm, focused, like I was finally doing what I was supposed to do. I could sense depth then, not visually but spatially, layers of earth, old foundations, soil compacted over decades, and far below that, a space that didn't feel empty, so much as cleared. I whispered without realizing it, "I know." The vibration changed immediately, stronger, closer. I snapped out of it when my neighbor pounded on the door, yelling about noise complaints. Apparently, I'd been dragging furniture across the floor at 3 in the morning. I didn't remember touching anything. When I looked back at the bedroom, the bed had been shoved aside. The rug was folded back. I was standing over bare concrete, centered, like I'd been marking a spot. I left the apartment that same night. I didn't pack, I didn't explain. I just walked until my feet hurt, then kept walking. I needed distance, not from a place but from depth. I ended up in a rural area again before I realized what I was doing. Smaller roads, fewer lights. The ground felt louder there, more responsive. That's when it hit me. Dunwich wasn't special because of what was there. It was special because of how thin everything above it had become. The hills, the wells, the pits. The animals chained far from homes. They weren't worshipping anything. They were managing it. And I had helped expose it by looking too closely, by listening, by noticing patterns that were never meant to be noticed by someone who planned to leave. I feel it now as I write this. The pressure has returned, stronger than ever. Not localized anymore, not underground. It's inside my chest, behind my eyes, beneath my thoughts. I don't think it needs Dunwich anymore. I think it learned something from me. If you're still listening, here's what I need you to understand. Don't map abandoned places. Don't dig where people stop digging. Don't assume silence means emptiness. And if you ever feel that pressure, like the ground beneath you is aware of your weight, move. Not away, up. Crowds, noise, elevation. Because once it realizes you can hear it, it doesn't need to follow you. It just waits for you to lie down. I don't know why I'm still writing. I think part of me believes that if I get all of this out, if I leave a complete record, and whatever I woke up will stay focused on me instead of drifting outward. That might be naive. It might already be too late. But this is the last part. After this, I'm done. I tried to follow my own advice. I stayed in public places, bus stations, 24-hour diners, airports where the floor never stopped humming with footsteps and engines. For a while, the pressure faded into background noise. I could almost forget it was there. Almost. What I didn't expect was how selective it became. It didn't respond to noise anymore. It responded to stillness inside me. Moments when my thoughts slowed, when I dissociated, when exhaustion took over and my body tried to shut down without permission. That's when it pressed back. I started catching myself standing in crowds without moving, staring at the floor, feeling out the vibrations through my shoes, not consciously, reflexively, like a habit I'd never had before but now couldn't unlearn. People noticed. A woman on a train asked if I was okay because I'd been standing in the same spot for 6 stops. A security guard told me I couldn't lie down on the terminal floor. A cashier asked why my hands were shaking so badly. I didn't have answers that wouldn't get me institutionalized. The worst part wasn't fear anymore, it was familiarity. I knew the patterns now, the subtle changes in pressure that meant attention versus indifference. The way certain buildings felt thicker than others. Old structures were better. New ones felt hollow underneath, like shortcuts. I started choosing where I stayed based on how far I felt from depth. That's when I realized something else, something I wish I hadn't. It wasn't everywhere, not yet. I don't remember deciding to go back to Dunwich. I only remember noticing one morning that all my routes, buses, trains, even walking paths, had been drifting north for weeks. Small decisions, subconscious choices, each one harmless on its own. Together they formed a straight line. By the time I recognized the landscape, it was already too late to pretend this wasn't intentional. The hills looked the same as before, too close together, too watchful. The air felt heavy in my lungs, like breathing before a storm. The town sign was gone. In its place was a newer one, cleaner, professionally made. No population number, just the name, Dunwich. The motel was closed, windows boarded up from the inside. The diner was still open, but different people were working there. Younger, tired. They looked at me the way people look at someone who's returned to a funeral after missing the service. No one asked why I was back. That scared me more than anything else. I walked instead of driving, following the same roads I'd documented before. The wells were capped now. Concrete poured thick and smooth. Fresh earth packed down around them. Distance mattered. They'd adjusted. I felt the pressure immediately, stronger than it had ever been. but controlled, focused, like a hand resting on my back, guiding rather than pushing. I followed it. The pit was gone. In its place was a wide, shallow depression, ringed with construction markers and temporary fencing. Heavy equipment sat abandoned nearby, dusted with dirt like it had been there far longer than it should have been. I stepped inside the fenced area without thinking. The ground gave slightly under my weight. That's when the sound changed. Not breathing, not vibration. A low, internal groan, like stress on metal far beyond its limit. The soil trembled, and panic slammed into me so hard, my vision blurred. I tried to run, my legs locked. I dropped to my knees again, just like before. The realization hit me all at once, sharp and absolute. It didn't need the pit anymore. The pit had been a mouth. This was a foundation. I screamed, not words, just sound, raw and useless. The ground answered, not by moving, but by settling, compacting, like it was making room. I felt something brush against the inside of my skull, not physically, structurally. Like pressure applied to a weak point I didn't know I had. And then suddenly, it stopped. Silence. Total. I stayed there for hours. I know that because the sun moved, I didn't. At some point, I became aware that I wasn't alone. People stood at the fence watching me, not approaching, not speaking, just waiting. When I finally stood up, my legs worked again. The pressure eased enough for me to think, and what I understood then hollowed me out. This wasn't about pursuit, it was about placement. Dunwich wasn't where it lived, it was where it was anchored, and anchors don't chase, they hold. I walked back through town without anyone stopping me, without anyone meeting my eyes. I felt finished, cataloged, like a problem already solved. That night I slept for the first time in months, dreamless. When I woke up, my notebook was open beside the bed. One final entry. You don't need to stay. I left Dunwich again before dawn. This time the pressure followed me, not constantly, but intermittently. Like a signal checking in, stronger in quiet places, weaker in motion, never gone. I understand it now. It doesn't want everyone, it wants listeners, people who notice patterns, people who map, measure, document, people who look at abandoned places and wonder why they were abandoned instead of accepting that they were. It wants minds that press back. I don't think it's malicious in the way we understand that word. I think it's structural, geological, old, in a way that doesn't care about intent. We're weight to it, stress on a system, and sometimes systems respond. This is where I stop. Not because the story is over, but because continuing to write feels like drawing a line straight down to wherever it's waiting. I don't know if this confession buys anyone's safety, or if it just sharpens the signal. But if you remember anything from this, remember this. If a place feels quiet in a way that presses inward, leave. If the ground beneath you feels aware of your weight, don't test it. If you ever feel drawn to the same spot over and over without knowing why, stop listening. Some horrors don't appear, they accumulate, and once they know you can hear them, they don't let go. They just wait until you're still enough to settle,